Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. My name is Mr. Spina, and I am here today to talk with you about the different parts that go into an argumentative paper or letter. Sometimes people call them persuasive papers or persuasive letters. We're just going to talk about today the pieces that go into those things, like what you should look for. Your teacher may have already made available to you this organizer for students. They may have called it a scaffold. It's just this document. This document right here basically summarizes everything I'm going to talk to you about in this video, okay? So you probably already know or will soon learn that this is how we're finishing the year in 7th grade language arts. And what you're going to do is you are going to create an argumentative or persuasive piece of writing. Most of you are going to write letters. Some of you may choose to do a presentation, and some of you may choose to do a more typical 5-paragraph paper. So we're going to talk about the things, the pieces that need to be present in all of those pieces, okay? All those persuasive or argumentative pieces of writing. So 4 parts, some of them you know, some of them are new. So for instance, you know what an introduction is, and all argumentative pieces of writing have introductions. You probably know what a body paragraph is. One new part we'll talk about is the acknowledge and refute paragraph, and then we'll talk about the conclusion and how the conclusion and the introduction are a little bit different in argumentative and persuasive writing. In the end, your paper will probably be 4 paragraphs, and paragraph number 1 will be the introduction. Paragraph number 2 will be a traditional A, B, C, D, E, or CER body paragraph. Paragraph number 3 will be acknowledge and refute, and your final and 4th paragraph will be your conclusion. Let's talk about your introduction in more detail. Some of these things are more advanced concepts, and some of them are a little more basic. In an introduction, I would consider the most important part, I'm going to hop around here, the thesis or the central idea. The thesis or the central idea is in fact the most important sentence in your entire paper because it tells your reader exactly what you are writing about. It defines what the whole paper is about. You want that thesis or central idea to be a simple, clear, and precise sentence that tells us exactly what you believe to be true. State your position simply, clearly, and precisely. That's really key. These 2 things are a little more advanced. Oftentimes in a persuasive piece of writing, particularly letters, we start by explaining our connection to a topic. For instance, if I were writing to the school board in Saline area schools about purchasing books for classrooms, I might introduce myself. Hello, my name is Mr. Spina, and I am a 7th grade teacher in Saline Middle School. That way they understand my connection to the topic of books in my writing, like who is this person and why do they care. The next thing that's a little more advanced even than that is the necessary background. Sometimes you need to explain a little bit of what has happened in the past or what is going on about the topic before you explain what you believe to be true about that topic. I don't think in your big writing topic today, or I'm sorry, for this school year, the one that we're using to finish out the school year, I don't know how much background you'll have to provide, but we'll figure that out when we get there, okay? And finally, the most advanced tip that I would give you for your introduction is that you might want to include the scope or the size of the problem. The scope just talks about how many people are impacted by the problem you are writing about. So for instance, in my example letter to the Saline Area School Board about books in the classroom, I might say, right now, if we can get more funds for books, it will help the 1,200 students in Saline Middle School. So that helps the reader understand how many people are being impacted by the problem you are writing about. So your introduction includes several things. The most important will be the thesis and the central idea. Oftentimes you'll express your connection to the topic, like who are you to this thing you're writing about. Sometimes you need to provide some background information on the topic you're writing about. And if you're really good, if you are really good, you'll be able to describe how many people are impacted by the thing you're writing about. Okay, so that's your introductory paragraph. I'm sorry, it's sliding all around like that. It happens to me sometimes. Let's talk about the body paragraph. So the second paragraph of your paper is going to be a traditional CER or ABCDE piece of writing. Your first sentence is going to be really important, where you really clearly state what it is that you believe to be true about your topic. You're going to want to support your topic using statistics. You might use an expert opinion. You might appeal to emotion, and you might use stories or anecdotes to support your idea. Keep in mind, we will talk later in the project about each of those types of evidence. I think in week 2, we'll talk about some of those other types of evidence, okay? So your body paragraph, I think you're pretty used to and you're pretty good at, especially if you've been doing a lot of ABCDE or CER writing. So that's your second paragraph of your paper. Let's talk about the third one. This is a new concept. It's pretty easy to get. It's called the acknowledge and refute paragraph. So in an acknowledge and refute paragraph, you do two things. You recognize the other side of the debate, and you show why that thinking is incorrect. Okay? Now imagine I am trying to persuade my parents to let me go out to the movies with my friends. And I tell them that I should be able to go to the movies because it's an educational movie, and I think it would be good to see. I also know that they're worried about the cost of the movie. So what I would do is I would recognize the other side of the debate, and I would solve the problem for them. I would show why their thinking is incorrect. So maybe my parents are worried about the cost of going to the movies. So I would say, in my third paragraph, I know that you don't want me to go to the movies because you're concerned about the cost of going. But I want you to see that instead of you paying for it, I'm going to use my allowance money to pay for my admission and for my snacks while I'm there. So I acknowledge that there's a different side to the discussion, and I'm showing why that different side is incorrect. Right? I kind of like solved the problem for them. That's a great technique. It's much better than just like throwing yourself on the floor and crying if you don't get your way, right? Let's talk about the fourth and the final paragraph in your paper. It's the conclusion. And a conclusion does what conclusions always do. First, they summarize what you have already written. And then in a persuasive or argumentative piece of paper writing, there's a special piece. It's called the call to action. And in a call to action, the writer, ask the reader to do something specific. And when we write our letters, we want to keep in mind that what we're asking them to do should be something within their power. So if I go back to the example where I'm writing to my parents or talking to my parents about going to the movies, a good call to action would be, I think it's time to let me go pay for the movies on my own. I'm ready for that. I'm asking them to let me go to the movies and pay for them, right? What I wouldn't say is something beyond their power. Like, what I want you to do is reduce the cost of the movies so that I can go with what little allowance money I have. My parents are awesome people, but they cannot change the price of a movie, right? It's just not within their power. So one thing a mature writer will do is they will think about who they are writing to and then think about what is within their powers, right? All right, so we have spoken. I'm going to go back to the second slide. We have spoken about all 4 parts of your argumentative or persuasive writing coming your way. And if you need help, you have access, hopefully, to this document. It's Organizer or Scaffold. As a reminder, you can also always come back to this video. I want to talk to you about your work that I want you to do for me or for your own teacher. I'm going to model what I want you to do, and then you are going to try it, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this Hang Up and Drive article. Yeah, there it is. This is a sample student writing from the West Coast, so it's not one of my students. And what I have done in this article and what you are going to do in a different article is I've gone through here and I've highlighted some of those key parts that we just talked about. So let's focus on this introductory paragraph. You see it every day, especially in freeway traffic. A car is weaving back and forth, speeding up, then slowing down or suddenly stopping. No, it's not a drunk driver, it's a cell phone driver. Cell phones are used everywhere, but on the road they are a dangerous distraction to drivers and should be prohibited. So I've identified 2 components. One is the scope, like how many people are impacted by this. Here the author is saying you see it every day. So they're talking about the general reader sees it all the time. So all of us are impacted really by this. The scope of the problem is every driver and every passenger, I suppose. This here is the most important sentence in the whole paper. It's where the author has stated clearly, simply, and precisely what they believe to be true. Cell phones should be prohibited for cars, right? That's good. That's good, simple writing. All right, let's look at this body paragraph. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you because this whole thing is about how motorists using a cell phone are 4 times more likely to have an accident than those not using a cell phone. This is the overall claim that basically driving while using a cell phone makes you more prone to have an accident. They talk here about the different types of accidents that happen, and then they talk here about the types of injuries that happen in those accidents. This right here is the use of statistics to support their idea. If you remember, we talked about the different types of evidence. In this case, they've used a stat from a reliable source, the California Traffic Safety Summit, right? Down here, this third body paragraph is the acknowledge and refute section of the paper. They state that there's another side of the argument. I know that cell phones are vital to our lives, and they also begin the process of showing why that other side of the discussion is wrong. But drivers at least need to be more responsible when using their cell phones. They talk about using hands-free devices or just not using it while you're driving or pulling over on the side of the road. So I get that your cell phone is really important to you and you're going to have it on you while you're driving, but you need to pull over when you get a phone call, right? Or just wait. And then finally, here is the call to action. The best road to safety is just hang up and drive. So they're asking us to just hang up and drive. Okay, that's what they're specifically asking us. All right, so in this piece, I was able to identify the scope, the central idea, some components of the body paragraph. I found the claim, I found a statistic, I found the acknowledge and refute, and then I found the call to action. What you're going to do is you're going to do that same work in the sample piece of writing that one of my students turned in. And if you're the student who wrote this, you don't have to do this work because you obviously can identify these things. I want you to identify as many of the different components that we just spoke about as possible in here. And just like before, just like I had done, you'll highlight them and you'll add a comment and then you'll say what you think you have found, okay? I'm going to go back to the slideshow. Yeah, so this is you try. You're going to see your Google Classroom for the Mars Patel sample. So your teacher, if they're going to have you do this, should have posted that sample student argumentative writing into your Google Classroom. Let's go back to this slide. I hope you found this informative, and I hope you realize that there are 4 components, 4 big parts of a argumentative or persuasive piece of writing, and I hope you remember to use those in your writing.